Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. In a dark forest in the land of fire in the village of Kanahagakure we find a small boy with spiky blonde hair with black and red highlights in his hair. His eyes were midnight black, he wore a green pair of shorts and a black shirt with a red spiral pattern on the back. He didn't have on a pair of shoes and beneath his shirt was very little body fat, almost to the point that bones were showing. The boy could be no older than 6 but no younger than 4. In front of the boy was a scene he was angry about. He saw a small pack of wolves surrounding a small black and white feline. It looked like about the size of a tiger cub. The cat had what looked like plating covering its body. The plating covered the front of his chest with spikes coming off it, the tip of which were red, its head excluding the ears and jaw, and finally the back legs joint with its body were also covered in. The plating was white, with red orange tribal markings going over it. The tip of the cub's tail was curled up and red, its eyes were orange and it had a pair of long incisors, long claws, and on the elbow joints on its legs were 3 white backwards facing spikes. The wolves circled around the cub and were just about to pounce on it when Naruto threw himself in front of the cub, unconsciously releasing chakra. The boy waited for the pain of the incoming wolves, hoping that the cub would get away. However, his eyes snapped open when, after a moment where no pain was inflicted upon his person, the blonde saw that none of the wolves were attacking. He turned around and grabbed the cub and ran. "It's okay, little fella, I'll keep you safe," said the boy as he ran. He looked down and saw that the cub was injured. After a second the wolves gave chase, but the boy was just a little bit faster, just enough to stay ahead of the wolves and pull away over a long distance. "Alright, the fence is just up ahead," muttered the boy as a large fence came into view. The boy quickly leapt from the ground into the low-hanging branches of the trees and managed to jump clear over the fence, his bare foot just grazing the sign on the fence as the boy sailed over the chain-link fence. The boy's blood from his previously bloody feet ran down the surface of the sign, not enough to obscure the text of "Forest of Death, keep out." "Alright, now we have to get to Hana-chan's place," muttered the boy to himself, stopping for a moment to think of where he needed to go and the safest way to get there. "I'll have to take the back alleys," muttered the blonde boy, taking off towards the nearby village, more specifically the maze of alleys that the boy knew like the back of his hands. The blonde dashed through the village, hiding in the back alleys looking for people. When he was forced to dash across the open streets, he was running through the back alleys of the market district, a civilian district. The civilians hated the blonde for a reason he was never quite sure of. He had never been specifically told what their problem, but from the insults they hurled at him whenever they saw him, he figured they thought that he was a demon of some sort. It hurt him, but not as much as it could. The blow was softened by the fact that it was only the civilians and civilian-born ninja. The clan-born ninja, excluding the Uchiha clan, were all fine with him. The blonde ran into the clan districts, one of the places in the village he was safe. The civilians would sometimes form mobs and attack the blonde, and the only places he was safe was in the Hokage's tower at the middle of the village, the red light district where he lived, and all of the thugs and whores treated him as family and hence he did the same, and finally in the clan district of Konoha where all of the clan compounds were. The blonde boy was currently on his way to one of the compounds. He was on his way to the Inuzuka compound to talk with his friend who was a vet, Hana. She would know what to do. He walked up to the gates of the Inuzuka compound where a ninja and a dog stood on guard. "Hey kid, found another injured animal?" questioned the man as he spotted the boy, who nodded at the question. The gate was then opened for the young blonde with the cub in his arms. "Hana's in the vet's office, I'm sure she'll be happy to see ya," said the man. The young child walked into the compound, and headed straight for the vet inside the compound. It took only a minute for the blonde to reach the regular-looking building that was his destination. Walking inside he saw the waiting room was all but empty. "Not really surprising given the time," muttered the black-eyed boy, looking over to the clock which read 9 p.m. "Naruto-kun," spoke a voice, drawing the blonde's attention, having just walked out of one of the rooms. "Hana-chan, hi," said the young blonde, looking up to the teen Inuzuka heiress. Hana had long brown hair which she wore in a ponytail with 2 locks of hair framing her face over her large, black eyes. She had the traditional fang-like tattoos of the Inuzuka clan on both of her cheeks. In addition to a tattoo on her upper right arm that of a flower, she wore a beige Konoha medic uniform, a pair of form-fitting shorts cut just above the knee, bandages just below her tattoo and wrist warmers. "So what's up, Naruto?" asked Hana, looking at the boy. "Oh right, I found this little guy in the forest of death being attacked by wolves," said Naruto, holding the little cub in his hands towards Hana. Alright, let's see what we can do," said Hana, leading her little friend to one of the examination rooms. Once inside the room, Naruto put the cub down on the examination table and Hana got to work examining the little animal and healing what she could with the healing chakra of the Shozen Jutsu, Mystic Palm Jutsu. After about 5 minutes she stopped her jutsu and turned to Naruto. "Your little friend will be fine, Naruto," said Hana with a happy smile. "Thanks, Hana-chan," said Naruto, scratching the cub behind its ear, making it purr. "Well, you should probably be off now, Naruto. You don't want to be out too late now, do you?" questioned Hana. Naruto nodded before hugging her. "Thanks again," said Naruto before picking up the cub and walking out of the building. Naruto headed for his home in the red light district. 20 minutes later. Naruto walked into his apartment, the cub still in his arms. His home wasn't much, but it was home to him. His apartment was 3 rooms big, one being a combined kitchenette, dining room and lounge room. The second of his rooms was a bedroom, and the last was a bathroom. The blonde boy put the cub on the floor next to him while he went to get something to eat before heading to bed. As he walked away, the cub followed him quietly, roaring happily. The blonde boy walked into his kitchenette and walked over to his cupboard to get some ramen out when he heard a poof sound behind him, followed by some growling. The blonde turned around and saw a grown-up equivalent of the cub between his legs on all 4, ready to pounce on him and slash him to pieces. However, the cub between his feet walked forwards and purred around the larger animal's own legs. The animal looked down at the cub, who then began meowing. The larger animal stopped its growling at Naruto before looking down at the cub, who then walked back over to Naruto and rubbed his head on the blonde boy's leg. Naruto, confused, leant down and patted the cub on the head. The larger animal walked over to the 2 of them, and then in a poof all 3 were gone from Naruto's apartment. #unknown location. Naruto and the 2 felines appeared in a plume of smoke and a poof. "What the?" questioned Naruto, looking around. He saw he was no longer in his apartment. In fact, he didn't recognize where he was, but before Naruto could take in the beauty of the place, he felt a tugging on his pants. He looked down and the feline cub he had found in the forest of death was tugging on his pants, and the larger feline was walking towards a large mountain. Naruto shrugged and followed the large feline with the cub bouncing along beside him. The 3 of them walked along the path up the mountain. About halfway up there was a cave entrance in the mountain that the older feline led Naruto into. Naruto just followed. Walking inside, Naruto was shocked to see the inside of the cave was giant, easily being able to fit 2 of the Hokage monuments on top of each other inside and still have room for the Hokage tower. However, what really caught his attention was the 6 creatures sitting on stone pedestals, with the exclusion of one that was in a pool of water. The first looked to be about 5'9" tall, the form of a person. However, she had bleach white skin from what little that was uncovered, as she covered almost all of her body with armor that was decorated with red tribal-like lines that looked similar to the plate-like things on the 2 felines Naruto had been with, who stood either side of him, and the woman wore what looked like a bird's skull of the same type of plating on her head. However, the eyes gave of an eerie red glow, and on her back is what appeared to be a scythe. The next creature was the one in the pool of water. It was quite simply a shark. The majority of its skin was black, the only exception being some more of the plating that was on the other creatures on its head, red tribal lines and all. The plates, however, didn't cover the creature's bright orange eyes, and it was at least 10 times the size of the humanoid one. Next was a giant bird. It was pitch black. The only exception was once more the white plating with red tribal patterns and the claws on the bird's feet and the middle of its wings, all of which were white, and the pure orange eyes, and was 2 times the size of the shark one. Fourth was what appeared to be a bear with once more black fur and white plates with red tribal lines covering them and orange eyes. However, this creature had what looked like stones embedded in its skin all over, with several larger spikes on either side of the spine of the creature, and was just a bit bigger than the human one. After that was a giant black praying mantis with the white plates on its front appendages and going from its head to the tip of its back with red tribal lines running along it and the orange eyes common among all of the creatures, and was at least 4 times the size of the bear. The last creature, however, was the scariest. It looked like a giant humanoid deer thing. It had the same body shape of a human, bipedal, arms, legs, however the limbs were within themselves, 2 limbs connected at the elbows and knees and joined once more at the clawed hands and the hoofs instead of feet. On the chest of the creature were 6 what looked like ribs, and for a head the creature had that of a psychopathic deer with sharp teeth, antlers and all. This one had less plating than the others, but it was still there. On top of the head, the ribs, and on the knees, this creature was the largest, almost reaching the ceiling of the cave. Razor, Lassoria, why have you brought this human here? Bellowed the deer creature. The 2 felines bowed to the 6 creatures before the larger feline started roaring back. So this human saved you, Razor, and you bring him here hoping to convince us to let him be our first summoner? Questioned the humanoid girl in a borderline insane cackle. The little feline roared. You boy, what is your name? Questioned the mantis. Naruto Uzumaki, declared Naruto without a hint of fear, hoping to take them off guard. Well, what say you, Uzumaki? Do you wish to try and become the first summoner of the creatures of Grimm? Questioned the bear-like creature. Naruto tilted his head to the side before nodding. Yes, if you will allow me, I would be honored to summon you, said Naruto. HMPH, fine, but first you must first pass a test, said the bird. Whatever this test is, I'll pass it for sure, declared Naruto boldly. All you must do is allow us to view your memories and then we shall decide if you are worthy, said the shark, and despite the water Naruto could understand it completely, which is why he became scared. My memories? Questioned Naruto. Yes, it is the only way to decide on your character, declared the giant moose man. And if I refuse? Questioned Naruto. This confused the great creatures. What happened to the boy's confidence? You will be forever banished from this court, said the bird. Naruto lowered his head in thought. He was half tempted to say no and run away. However, just before he could give an answer, the feline cub rubbed his head on Naruto's hand, making the blonde smile down at the creature. I'll take your test, stated Naruto, his confidence back once more. The humanoid creature jumped from her perch and landed in front of Naruto before placing her hand on his forehead, before a second later removing it as she fell back. Hey, are you okay? Asked Naruto, catching her as she fell. How are you still sane? Questioned the woman. Silenthia, if you please, said the bear. The woman stood up fully and walked into the center of the room, where she knelt down on a seal. After placing her hands on the ground either side of her, they glowed as did the seal on the floor. All 5 of the great creatures took a deep breath. After a second, their faces morphed into a look of shock mixed with loathing. Naruto Uzumaki, I believe I speak for the rest of the Grimm Council when I say I congratulate you, our new summoner, spoke the big deer moose man thing, getting a nod from the other 5. Then after a second, the seal where Silenthia had been glowed once more, and out of it floated a scroll and what looked like a half mask made of the plate stuff. Just sign your name in blood on the scroll and you will be our summoner. The mask is so you can understand the lesser Grimm, as only the members of the Grimm Council or the boss summons of each branch of our clans can actually speak to you directly, said the bear. Naruto ran through the streets of Konoha. He was running from a mob. It had been not even a full day since Naruto gained the summoning contract with the creatures of Grimm. He had the mask on his face as he thought it was cool, and on his left arm was black tribal-like markings similar to those of the markings on the masks of the creatures of Grimm. Stop running, demon, yelled a member of the mob. Naruto of course didn't stop. He sped up as much as he could. Slowly but surely the mob behind him fell further and further behind him. However, just as he was almost in the clear, out of nowhere a kunai sailed into his leg, making the blonde stumble and trip, rolling forwards, making the kunai dig into his leg some more and gave the mob time to catch up to him. Once he stopped rolling, Naruto sat up and ripped the kunai out of his leg with a scream of pain and threw the weapon away before jumping to his feet, where he almost crumpled to the ground due to the pain in his leg. With a great amount of effort, Naruto managed to hobble his way forwards, but the mob was closing in fast. The blonde tried his best to move, but he knew the mob would catch him, and just like that, a hand grabbed him by the back of the shirt and yanked him backwards. "Not so tough are you now, demon?" questioned the man who had Naruto in a tight grip before throwing the blonde into a wall. "OWWW!" screamed Naruto as he hit the wall, his wounded leg hitting the edge of a brick, making Naruto fall to the ground, and like that the rest of the mob launched into a flurry of attacks, everyone in the 30-strong mob getting a kick, punch, stab or other attack in. "This is for my son, monster," declared a brute of a man coming up with a lead pipe to slam down on the blonde. Naruto brought his blood-covered left arm up to defend from the attack, subconsciously pushing chakra into the limb to strengthen it, and closing his eyes waiting for the pain. However, the pain never came. Naruto's eyes opened, and in front of him was a black and white creature. "Lassoria!" exclaimed Naruto happily but breathlessly at the creature as she stood protectively in front of her summoner with her tail flicking back and forth growling at the mob. "The demon called back up them both!" exclaimed a man at the back of the crowd, getting a chorus of yes before the mob once more tried to descend on the blonde and his summon. The boy, having already succumbed to the call of unconscious, was protected by the creature of Grimm. #5 minutes later. Running down the street flanked by two Anbu was Hiruzen Sarutobi. He had heard Naruto scream in pain and had come rushing from his office and was immediately joined by the pair of Anbu, Neko and Inu. The Sandaime Hokage had Enma in his staff form. As he ran, he had sensed Naruto's chakra drastically drop and got Inu and Neko and come running. As the three people rounded a corner, they came across a disturbing sight: Naruto laying sprawled out next to a building covered in blood, but in front of the blonde was a black feline-like creature, and around the two of them blood and limbs were scattered everywhere. The group of the village leader and two of his most loyal Anbu approached the two, but the second the creature spotted them, it jumped to its feet and looking ready to pounce, it growled at them. What is it?" questioned Neko, never having seen a creature like it before. "I'm not sure," said Inu, examining the creature with his gifted Sharingan. "It's called a razorback. She's a summon of the creatures of Grimm clan," spoke the staff in Hiruzen's hand. "A summon?" questioned Sarutobi, looking at the creature. "Whose?" questioned the elderly Kage, looking around. "I'm not entirely sure, but from the looks of it she may be Naruto's summon," spoke the Monkey King. "Is that true? Are you protecting Naruto?" questioned Hiruzen, looking at the creature, trying to calm it down. "We're here to help Naruto, but if you don't move we can't help him," said Hiruzen, lowering his staff as a show of non-aggression. The Grimm growled even louder at the three of them. "Ugh!" groaned Naruto, his eyes opening just a bit. "Lassoria, it's okay, these people are okay," said Naruto. With that, the Razorback backed down and let the three people pick up her master, but she followed them as they took him to the hospital. Once there, they went straight into the room that was set aside for any Jinchuriki. Having many seals on the inside and out to stop people breaking in and attacking the Jinchuriki while also suppressing the Biju chakra, Naruto was laid on the bed as a doctor healed the wound in his leg, with the Razorback watching them intently, not letting anyone but the two Anbu, the Hokage and the one doctor near Naruto. While the doctor was working on Naruto, Neko stood in the hallway with the Hokage. "No more Hokage-sama," declared Neko. "I'm not sure I can," said Hiruzen. "You know damn well what I mean, Hiruzen. If you're not going to let me adopt him, at least let me train him," declared Yugao, interrupting the aged Hokage. "It would be unfair on the other Kai," began Hiruzen. "No, it wouldn't. It's unfair on Naruto. All of the children in the academy have someone in the family with either ninja training or contacts with a ninja who owes them a favor that can be used to train them. Naruto has nothing. I don't care anymore about taking him in. Just let me help him, please," begged the purple-haired Anbu operative. "All right, Yugao, starting tomorrow you can train Naruto," said Hiruzen. "And I want to tell him about Kushina-sensei," said the now identified Yugao. "No," replied Hiruzen flatly. "You may think that by not telling him about her you're protecting him, but we both know that's not true. Yes, she had enemies, But if you were to tell Naruto not to tell anyone about her being his mother, he wouldn't say a word. And second of all, Kiri is in a civil war right now, and it's very unlikely they have ninja to spare to send to assassinate the son of Kushina. And by telling Naruto about her, he doesn't have to go through life wondering if his mother abandoned him. Yes, Kushina-sensei may never wake, but wouldn't you want to meet your mother if you were in his shoes, declared Yugao. Hiruzen sighed. She had brought up many good points and counters to all of his worries. Fine, but he has to be up to speed by the time he enters the academy, or I will assign someone else to his training, said Hiruzen. Yugao nodded. The time allotted would be plenty to get Naruto up to snuff. Several hours later. The two people walked into Naruto's room only to see him sitting on his bed with a mirror in hand, canceling chakra to his eyes, then stopping and then doing it again, giggling to himself the whole time. Looking at his eyes, the two ninja realized why. Yugao, change of plans, get me Makoto, declared Hiruzen, walking out of the room once more, Yugao following before shunshining out. 5 minutes later. Walking into the hospital, Makoto spotted Hiruzen passing back and forth. You asked for me, Hokage-sama? Questioned Makoto, walking up to the aged leader. Oh, Makoto. Yes, earlier this evening I was convinced by one of my Anbu to allow her to train young Naruto and at the same time reveal information about Kushina to him, declared the aged man. And you called me here because you want me to train him? Asked Makoto, hopeful. Yes and no. Originally the plan was only for Yugao to train him, however after a revelation since then I have decided your expertise will be needed, said Hiruzen. What was the revelation? Asked Makoto. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, so instead I will show you, and then you and Yugao can tell Naruto about the training and his mother, said Hiruzen, walking down the corridor to Naruto's room. Within a minute Makoto and Hiruzen were at Naruto's door, Yugao following closely behind the two. Hiruzen opened the door and walked in, Makoto following closely behind, and as Makoto walked into the room her jaw dropped when she saw what Naruto was doing. His eyes kept going from their regular midnight black to blood red with a pair of tomo in them. I'll leave you two to it, said Hiruzen, leaving the room. Naruto, said Yugao softly, making the boy look up with his Sharingan still active. Who are you two? Asked Naruto, looking at the purple-haired maskless Anbu operative who seemed familiar to him, and the charcoal-haired housewife. Rar roar roar rar, roared Naruto Summon, who was still sitting on his bed. Naruto looked at Lassoria before realizing he didn't have his mask, so he couldn't understand her. Naruto quickly looked around the room for his mask, finding it on his bedside he quickly replaced it. Say again, Lassoria, said Naruto. The purple-haired one is one of the two masked people you said was okay. I'm not sure about the other one, spoke the creature, translated only to Naruto. The blonde boy turned back to the two women, one of who was still in shock, the other was looking a little nervous. Neko ne? Questioned Naruto, squinting behind his mask, looking at Yugao. Yes, although when without my mask you can call me Yugao, said Yugao, getting a nod from Naruto. Allow me to introduce myself, Naruto. My name is Makoto Uchiha, said Makoto. Naruto nodded, unsure of the woman. And I was your mother's best friend and teammate, said Makoto, making Naruto's eyes go wide behind his mask. Why, you knew my mother? Questioned Naruto. Makoto nodded to the boy. Who was she? Did she love me? Where is she now? Asked Naruto in quick succession. Before we tell you about her, Naruto, we need to tell you about a deal made between us and the Hokage, said Yugao. Naruto looked at her for a moment. We are going to train you as a ninja and tell you what we know of your mother, but in return we need you to work very hard on the skills we teach you, and you can't tell anyone who your mother is. The reason you haven't been told about her before is she had enemies strong enough that they would send hundreds of ninja after you just because of what she did, said Yugao. Naruto nodded. I accept those terms now, please. My mother, began Naruto. Her name is Kushina Uzumaki and she loves you more than life itself, but she is, well, it would be easier to show you, said Makoto, her words taking a sad turn towards the end. This got Naruto scared, but nonetheless he got out of his bed and followed Makoto, who left the room. As Naruto left the room, Lassoria disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Makoto walked down the halls of the hospital with Naruto and Yugao following to the comatose ward. After a minute of walking through the halls, Makoto stopped and opened the door to a room before walking, followed by Naruto and Yugao. Naruto was shocked to see on the bed a beautiful red-haired woman. Her eyes were shut and she was lying on a bed. This Naruto is your mother Kushina. She's been in a comatose state since the night of the Kyuubi attack. The doctors have tried everything to revive her as she is one of this village's best kunoichi, but nothing has worked, said Makoto. Naruto stiffly walked up to the bed and looked down at the woman on the white hospital bed. Hokage-sama, aside from the reasons of her enemies didn't want to tell you about her to get your hopes up for naught, the doctors say it's very unlikely she will ever wake again, said Makoto. Both women watched from behind Naruto as he reached out and gently grasped her hand. Both Makoto and Yugao caught sight of a single tear falling from Naruto's face. Ka-chan, whispered Naruto, looking at the woman's face, smiling. I finally know who she is, thought Naruto happily. It took a whole of 10 minutes for Naruto to get the hand signs right and then another 40 minutes to get to the stage where it took less than half a minute to go through all 12 of them before spending another 10 minutes to practice at that speed, which for this point in time was good enough. Alright Naruto, that will work for now, declared Yugao, calling the blonde over. Naruto walked up to his two sensei who both wore smiles. Alright Naruto, the first thing you going to do is this, said Makoto, pulling a leaf of a nearby tree and placing it on her head between her eyes where it stuck in place. Whoa, that's so cool, said Naruto, looking at the leaf. Alright Naruto, to do this exercise you'll need to put your hands into the ram hand sign and then taking the warm feeling from your tummy up to the leaf, said Yugao, handing Naruto a leaf. Lean your head back and put the leaf on your forehead, stated Makoto. Naruto nodded and leaned his head back and placed the leaf on his forehead before putting his hands into the correct sign before willing his chakra from his navel to his forehead, hoping the leaf would stick. But once the young Uzumaki's chakra reached his forehead, the leaf was blown off of his head. The young blonde looked at the leaf in shock before looking down in sadness. Hey, it's okay Naruto, no one get it on their first try, you just used too much chakra, said Makoto in a caring tone. Just keep it at Naruto, I'm sure you'll get it, said Yugao. About 2 hours later. Alright Naruto, that's enough, said Yugao, stopping Naruto from putting the leaf back on his head. But it's still getting blown off, said Naruto. Well, getting it to stay there for half a minute after only 2 hours working on the exercise is amazing, but we have another couple of things to work on today, said Yugao. Oh okay, said Naruto. That doesn't mean stop practicing this exercise, just don't worry about it for now, said Makoto, getting a nod from the woman beside her. Okay, so what's next? Asked Naruto. We're going to show you how to throw kunai, said Makoto with a grin on her face, flicking her hands out to the side where said weapons appeared between her fingers, making Naruto jump. Makoto and Yugao both giggled at Naruto's reaction, and the young boy had to admit to himself it was one of the most melodious things he had ever heard. Makoto then stopped her giggling and got back on track, flicking the kunai in her hands up and catching all bar one by the bladed end. She held them out to Naruto. Here, I'll show you and you try your best to do as I do, okay? Said Makoto. Naruto nodded. Makoto threw the kunai at the target. Naruto watched her movement, which she slowed down for Naruto's sake. After the blade left Makoto's hand, it sailed into the dead center of the target. Naruto quickly stepped forwards, taking aim at one of the targets and following Makoto's actions as closely as he could. He threw the weapon towards the target. The kunai became lodged just inside the outermost ring of the target. Naruto's head sunk. It's okay Naruto, no one was expecting you to hit dead center. That would have been almost unbelievable. Actually hitting the target is quite good for someone your age, said Makoto. At this, Naruto's head perked up again to look once more at his two smiling sensei. Keep going Naruto, you'll get it in no time, said Yugao with a reassuring smile sent the blonde's way. Naruto nodded and once more threw the kunai at the target. It got in the same ring. An hour and a half later. Once more Naruto was instructed to stop his exercise. Naruto collected the kunai one last time and gave them back to Makoto. Alright Naruto, one more thing and then you can go home for today, but tomorrow we want to see you here bright and early, said Yugao. Yes Yugao-sensei, said Naruto with a salute, making both women giggle at his antics. Alright Naruto, 5 laps around the training ground, said Makoto. Naruto's jaw dropped. Why you're joking, you have to be joking right? Questioned the blonde. Did I stutter? Get going or you get a complimentary course on dodging, said Makoto with a sadistic smirk on her face as more kunai appeared in her hands, and with that Naruto was gone, leaving a roughly Naruto-shaped cloud of dust in his place. Hashtag 2 hours later Naruto stumbled through his door about half an hour after the sun set. He was going to make himself something to eat but he felt too tired to do so the blonde trudged to bed and fell onto his thin mattress, and as soon as he hit the mattress he was out like a light. Hashtag 3 weeks later Naruto's life had been one of routine for the last 3 weeks. Wake up, morning rituals, to the training grounds where one or both of his sensei would be waiting, hand sign practice for an hour. Leaf balancing exercise, kunai practice, then they'd break for lunch which Naruto would get his food, then go to the hospital and spend an hour with his mother telling her what he'd been doing, before going back to the training ground for some basic skills lessons like reading and writing before his sensei got him running around like a madman until dark, when he dragged himself home, ate something and collapsed on his bed, but the results were showing. In the 3 weeks Naruto had lowered the time it took for his hand signs to 10 seconds to go through all 12 of them, up the time for the leaf to about 5 minutes at a time before his attention became wobbly and the leaf flew off faster than he did in his running because he had learned the hard way. Makoto had been serious about giving him a complimentary lesson on dodging on the second day when he went too slow for her standards. So when Naruto got to the training ground this morning he was expecting to start with hand signs. Good morning Naruto, said Makoto as she spotted him walking up. Morning Makoto-sensei, Yugao-sensei, said Naruto, nodding his two sensei as he walked up. So more hand sign practice today? Asked Naruto, not really expecting a different answer. No, we're stopping the hand sign practice today, but instead there is something we are going to start, said Yugao. Really, what? Asked Naruto. Before we start we need you to pump chakra into this, okay Naruto? Asked Makoto, handing Naruto what looked like an ordinary scrap of paper. Naruto took it and looked it over before shrugging and doing as instructed. Naruto concentrated chakra on the paper and to his shock the paper split into 3 even pieces. The one section on the left crinkled and curled in on itself, and just as Naruto was about to ask what the hell was going on, the next 2 bits reacted, the one in the center bursting into flames and burning to ashes in no time at all, and the third getting sopping wet. However, once more after a second break a third set of reactions went off. The crinkled third got sopping wet, turning into what looked like a storm cloud, and then the wet piece burst into water-lodged confetti. Naruto waited a good 10 seconds before he spoke, which gave his sensei time to pick their jaws up off the floor. What was that? Asked a very confused Naruto. That was chakra paper. It reacts in various ways depending on the user's chakra nature, said Makoto, still in awe of what she saw. And? Questioned Naruto, looking down at the bits of paper. Well, it splits for futon, crinkles for Raiden, burns for Kaden, soaks for Sweden, and crumbles to dust for Doden. I have no idea what the crinkling then soaking or the soaking then splitting means, Makoto, said Yugao before turning to the Uchiha for her input on the situation. I know what the other 2 are, but I'm not sure I believe it, said Makoto, looking at the bits of paper in Naruto's hand. What is it? Asked Naruto, looking scared. Kushina once told me about a Kekkei Genkai of the Uzumaki clan seen once in a century, the Arashi Yumeru, Stormborn. It was said the users of this Kekkei Genkai created the whirlpools Uzushiogakure was famous for. They were also said to be able to summon storms and gales at the snap of their fingers, said Makoto. So I have this Arashi Yumeru Kekkei Genkai? Questioned Naruto. From what Kushina told me, yes, I can only assume yes, said Makoto. Awesome! Yelled Naruto as he started jumping around happily. The two elder ninjas smiled at the boy's enthusiasm, but Makoto had to interrupt the boy as she had some teaching to do. All right, Naruto, clam down, said Makoto, making the boy stop and turn to her. That's not why I was testing your chakra, but it is good to know. But for now I want to show you a jutsu that is a rite of passage for any young Uchiha, and given that you have the Sharingan you have to be related to an Uchiha, said Makoto. Sharin wa? Questioned Naruto. Remember from the hospital when you were able to make your eyes red? Asked Makoto. You mean like this? Questioned Naruto, concentrating chakra on his eyes, making them go from charcoal black to blood red with a pair of tomo in them. Yes, that's what I mean. Those eyes are another Kekkei Genkai. They're the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan anyway. There is a jutsu taught to all young Uchiha before they can wear the symbol of our clan and generally before they unlock their Sharingan, said Makoto. Naruto nodded. Alright, watch closely, Naruto, said Makoto as she started flipping through hand signs. Kaden Gokaku no Jutsu, fire-style fireball jutsu, called Makoto, bringing her fingers in the shape of a ring to her mouth before spewing out a ball of fire that flew out towards a rock wall where it exploded on contact. She turned to Naruto, who was looking on in awe. The trick with this jutsu is it's a fire jutsu, so you need to convert chakra in your lungs to flames and then breathe them out with the rest of your breath, so just imagine the air in your lungs heating up, then you breathe it all out, said Makoto. Naruto nodded to the instructions and then got to work. It was the first jutsu he had been taught, so he was going to work hard on it, and with a flurry of hand signs Naruto began his jutsu training. I'm getting sick of this, growled Naruto as he ran from a mob once more. The blonde was once more getting chased by a mob of Konoha civilians and ninja. The best he could do was throw kunai. He had successfully got the Kaden Gokaku no Jutsu, fire-style fireball jutsu, down, but he could only perform it standing still or at the very least facing his targets, which he couldn't do because if he were to turn the mob would catch up for sure. Naruto was so concentrated on running he failed to notice that he was near the front gates of Konoha, until he bowled straight into someone, knocking them over. Sorry, said Naruto, jumping to his feet ready to bolt away, that is until the person reached out and grabbed his wrist. What's the rush? Asked the woman. Naruto turned to her. She was a ninja. He could see her headband. She had long black hair and ruby red eyes. She wore a red and white garment that looked like it was just a bunch of bandages draped over her figure. That, declared Naruto, pointing to the mob that came running out of the nearby street. The woman jumped to her feet and looked at the boy. What did you do? Asked the woman. Nothing, I swear, said Naruto, hiding behind the woman. Now. You'd our families, you little bastard, yelled a member of the mob, all of whom had stopped as Naruto hid behind the woman. The entire mob wasn't sure if the woman would be on their side or Naruto's. The kunoichi turned to the blonde boy who was cowering behind her and looked him over, and then it struck her. Naruto? Questioned the woman. How do you know my name? Asked Naruto, ready to bolt. It's okay, Naruto, I won't hurt you now, just stay behind me, okay? Whispered the woman with a reassuring smile. Naruto nodded. You lot leave now or things will get ugly, and I swear you don't want things to get ugly, snarled the ebony-haired woman, making some of the people in the crowd jump at the venom in her tone. It's just one person, get her, declared one of the people from the middle of the mob, giving the rest of the mob a bout of courage. Not a good thing. Megan banning Ugoka, demonic illusion burning hellfire, called the woman. Everyone in the mob stopped before dropping to the ground screaming in agony. The woman then turned to Naruto, who wore a look of pure awe. That was awesome. What was that? Can you teach me that please, Miss Pretty Lady? Asked Naruto. The ebony-haired woman blushed at his compliment. That was genjutsu. I might teach you that at some time, and my name is Kurenai, not Miss Pretty Lady, said the now identified Kurenai. Naruto nodded at her answers before he remembered how he met Kurenai. I'm so sorry for running into you, Kurenai-san, and I thank you for protecting me from those people, said Naruto, bowing. One of the first things Makoto and Yugao had taught him was respect and manners, and he would not forget that lesson. He could still feel the stinging on his head. No problem, Naruto, and Kurenai is fine, said Kurenai. Naruto nodded before he remembered what time it was. Oh damn, I need to go, muttered Naruto, running off. Nice meeting you, Kurenai, said Naruto, waving as he ran off towards his home. Kurenai waved to him with a smile as he ran off. Hashtag the next morning training ground hash. Naruto wandered up to the training ground. He was still thinking about his ruby-eyed savior from the night before and her genjutsu. Morning, Naruto, said Makoto, snapping Naruto from his daze. Morning, Makoto-sensei, said Naruto, looking at the woman. Alright, Naruto, for now you will be working on the fireball jutsu, said Makoto. But sensei, I can use it, you saw yourself yesterday, said Naruto, having no idea why she would want him to work on a jutsu he already had down. Yes, but I want you to practice some more. It's good to practice with the jutsu so you don't go wasting chakra when you use it, and if you get skilled enough with the jutsu you can decrease the amount of hand signs you need to use for the jutsu, and even you might get to the point where you only need one-handed hand sign and not need to call the name, said Makoto. Like so, declared Makoto, making a half-tiger hand sign with one hand before breathing out a huge ball of fire that flew over to a nearby rock wall and blew up. Wow, that's cool. Don't worry, Makoto-sensei, I'll have this jutsu down in not time, you'll see, declared Naruto, running off to begin his training. Makoto shook her head. Naruto reminded her so much of Kushina. Hashtag an hour later hash. Naruto, yelled Makoto, getting the blonde's attention. He ran from his position to the woman. Yes, sensei? Asked Naruto. I think in Yugao said I should before she left on her mission. It's time to start your taijutsu training, said Makoto. Really, sensei? Asked Naruto, getting a nod from the woman. Awesome, yelled Naruto, jumping up, punching the air. Okay, calm down, Naruto, said Makoto, resting her hand on his shoulders, making him quickly calm down. Now, Naruto, I'm going to be teaching you the Uchiha Interpreter Fist, said Makoto. Naruto adopted a thinking pose. That was the main gender-fluid Uchiha taijutsu style, right? Asked Naruto. Makoto nodded. Yes, and once I teach you the style, if you want to learn a shinobi-specific Uchiha style, I'll take you to the clan vaults so you can look for one, okay? Asked Makoto. I really just want to learn from you and Yugao-sensei though, muttered Naruto with a pout. Well, we can't do that, Naruto, you're a boy and I'm a girl. I only know gender fluid and kunoichi styles, and kunoichi styles are just that, styles for kunoichi aka girls, declared Makoto. Why did ninja even start the separation of gender-specific styles anyway? Asked Naruto. Well, Naruto, during the Warring States period the shinobi clans of the world were hired to do missions, and some of those missions required specific genders to accomplish the mission. That's what started it, and then kunoichi and shinobi started coming up with styles that for various reasons only work for either shinobi or kunoichi, be it they rely on the user's body to distract the opposite genders, the flexibility of a kunoichi that not even the most trained of shinobi could hope to duplicate, or the strength of a shinobi that no kunoichi could match. There are just some styles that only work for one gender, declared Makoto, going into a pseudo-lecture mode. Okay, I guess it makes sense, muttered Naruto, looking down. Well, let's get started, said Makoto, getting into the most basic stance of the interpreter fist. Hashtag 3 hours later hash. The sensei and student spent 3 hours on the basics of the Uchiha's main gender-fluid taijutsu style, and Naruto had got most of the basic katas down for the moment, so now they were taking a break. Naruto sitting under a tree puffing, while Makoto sat next to him. Hey sensei, called Naruto, breaking the silence that had held the two of them. Was the response of Makoto, indicating she was listening. Could you tell me about genjutsu? Questioned Naruto, causing Makoto to raise an eyebrow. Why do you want to know? Asked Makoto, turning to look at her apprentice, who looked down. I got chased again last night, said Naruto. What? Screamed Makoto. A mob of villagers chased me again, but just as they were catching up I ran into a lady who used a genjutsu on the people and they stopped and fell to the ground, said Naruto. Well, Naruto, the simplest explanation of a genjutsu is an illusion. A genjutsu user projects their chakra into their target's chakra system, and with that creates illusions on the senses, be it touch, taste, sight, smell, or hearing, declared Makoto. Naruto nodded, satisfied with that explanation. Well Naruto, with that over, back to training time to practice your kunai throwing, said Makoto, getting up. Hashtag later that night hash. Makoto stood by her stove making her family dinner, quietly humming to herself. Ka-chan, when a voice interrupted her. Yes, Sasuke-chan, questioned Makoto. Where have you been? Asked the now identified Sasuke. Makoto turned to face her youngest son. What do you mean, Sasuke? I've been here, said Makoto. No, earlier today, declared Sasuke. I was out, Sasuke, replied Makoto. And the last few days, declared Sasuke. I've been busy, Sasuke. Now go clean up, dinner's almost ready, said Makoto, effectively ending her son's probing. Hashtag the next morning hash. Makoto was walking towards the training grounds where she and Yugao were training Naruto. Everything was normal except dashing from one side street to another. Watching Makoto from the shadows of the street was Sasuke. He had decided that he was going to find out what his mother was doing during the day, and so when she had left he had, stealthily, followed his mother. Makoto had known from the second she walked out of her home Sasuke was following her. It wasn't that his stealth was bad, it was actually quite good for someone his age, but that's the point, someone his age, aka 6. Makoto had been an Anbu captain for that many years. She knew exactly where Sasuke was at all times, but rather than call her son out, she simply decided to let him be. He might even befriend Naruto. That would be nice, just like their mothers, though Makoto with a smile as she strolled towards the training grounds. Hashtag at the training ground hash. Naruto had just arrived at the normal training ground to find neither of his sensei present, but instead of taking the initiative to start on what he had been doing yesterday, Naruto simply sat down by a post and leaned back on it with his eyes shut. Makoto with her tail arrived only moments later. Good morning, Naruto, declared Makoto in a happy tone, making the boy's eyes snap open. Morning, sensei, said Naruto with a smile. Sensei? What the hell? Thought Sasuke from his hiding place behind a tree. Sensei, before we begin, there's someone behind that tree, spoke Naruto, pointing to the tree Sasuke was hiding behind. Crap, I've been found, what do I do? Thought Sasuke in a panic, hiding behind the tree. Naruto saw Sasuke. No, that's not possible, Sasuke was too well hidden for that. Then how did Naruto find him? No way, thought Makoto to herself before. You can come out now, declared Makoto, turning around to see. Surprise, surprise, Sasuke stepped out from behind the tree. Naruto, how did you know he was there? Asked Makoto, looking at the blonde, wondering if her hypothesis was right. I don't really know, I just saw him when I had my eyes shut. What's that mean, Makoto-sensei? Asked Naruto. Why the hell are you calling my Ka-san sensei? Questioned Sasuke in a rude tone. Sasuke, don't be so rude, scolded Makoto. Why are you training a peasant, Ka-san? You could train me, said Sasuke, his chest puffing out with Uchiha pride. Naruto looked hurt by the young Uchiha's comment and he turned to leave. Naruto, you stay right there, stated Makoto, making Naruto freeze. And as for you, mister, stop acting like a spoiled brat. I've raised you better than that, and I have offered many times to train you, but you always say you want Itachi or your 2-san to help you, so no, I'm not going to train you, Sasuke. You gave up your chance. And don't speak like you're royalty, Sasuke, because you're not, and Naruto isn't a peasant, he's a member of our clan and another clan, and I'm training him because unlike you he has no parents waiting for him when he goes home, declared Makoto. So go home, Sasuke, I'll be home later, said Makoto, making Sasuke tear up and run home. Makoto sighed. She would have to apologize to him later, but right now she had teaching to do. Alright, all those who have just been called, follow me, called a scar-faced Chunin. The man was Iruka Yumio and he was to be Naruto's academy teacher. Naruto followed the man into the building, along with the rest of the class, about 30 strong, 35 or 6-year-olds. The class made their way to room 104, which was on the ground floor of the building. Alright, everyone take a seat and we'll get started, said Iruka. Naruto casually walked up the stairs to the back corner table closest to the window where he took the window seat. He wasn't really expecting to make any friends, even if the parents hadn't told their kids to avoid him, Naruto wasn't the most social person. May we sit here? Asked a soft voice from next to Naruto. The boy turned towards the voice expecting to see them looking some other way, not feeling he looked like a person to sit next to, when he saw two girls looking at him. One had ice blue hair and eyes. Her hair was tied up into two pigtails on the side of her head and she was partially hiding behind the second girl who evidently was the one who asked the question. She had long dark blue hair tied into a ponytail. She had red eyes that were hidden by the pair of black framed glasses wrapped around her face which bore two scars partially going across her left eye. Also tied into the girl's hair was a black and red flower. Sure, said Naruto shrugging. I'm Kalina Jigoku and this is Makari Karaikage, said the red-eyed girl smiling at Naruto as she took a seat. Naruto Uzumaki Uchiha, said Naruto before subconsciously rubbing the Uchiha fan necklace he wore. Before any more pleasantries could be exchanged between the three of them, Iruka spoke up once more. Alright students, I know you're all probably keen to get into practicing to become ninja of this village, but to begin with, for at least a while the academy will be providing the basic education the rest of the village would get. #lunchtime hash. After several hours of tedium, Naruto was one of the first people out of the building and into the yard, where he walked over to a solitary tree with a swing hanging from it. Naruto took a seat at the base of the tree and pulled out his lunch. It wasn't anything fancy, just something he threw together the previous night when he couldn't sleep. So Naruto, came the voice of Kalina. Naruto looked up from his food to see once more the two girls that had sat beside him were now standing in front of him. Yeah, asked the blonde, not sure why they were talking with him. I didn't actually get to ask what I wanted to earlier, so I'll ask now, what's with the mask? Asked the dark blue-haired girl. Mask. Oh, this, said, pulling the Grimm mask off his face. Yeah, it looks cool, where'd you get it? Asked Kalina. Well, I got it from my summons, said Naruto a little bit sheepishly. The blonde knew how unusual it was for someone his age to have a summoning contract, let alone know what they were. Really? So I'm not the only one with a summons? Phew, said Kalina. Wait, you have a summons too? Asked Naruto. Yeah, I'm a member of the Jigoku clan. Silly. Our clan has a contract with the demons. Each of us from when we unlock chakra binds a demon to ourselves to fight for us, said Kalina. So Naruto-san, what's your summoning contract with? Asked Makari timidly. You won't have heard of them, they're the creatures of Grimm. This mask was given to me so that I could understand the lesser Grimm, as only the boss summons and clan elders can speak English, said Naruto holding up his mask. That sounds pretty cool, said Kalina. Uzumaki, roared a voice from over by the school building. Naruto sighed and bit his thumb before running it over the summoning tattoo on his arm before slamming his hand on the ground. Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning jutsu, called Naruto as his hand hit the ground and a sealing matrix spread out from under his hand. Then the area was engulfed in smoke. Once the smoke cleared, there sat Laswara and Razor looking around to see Naruto, who had placed his mask back on his face. Naruto ni, roared the razorback cub before running over to Naruto, who leant down and patted the cub's head. Fight me, Uzumaki, ordered Sasuke, glaring at the blonde as he walked up to him, only for the larger razorback to jump in front of Naruto, growling at Sasuke. Sasuke, I will tell you again, and this is the last time, I'm not going to fight you because your mother is training me and you want me to stop letting her teach me. And if you order me to fight you one more time, I will let Laswara rip you to pieces, declared Naruto, the large razorback stalking forwards, while Naruto played with the razorback cub. These are your summons? Questioned Kalina, looking at the two creatures, in a tone Naruto couldn't quite identify. The blonde nodded. They're so cool, declared Kalina, patting Razor's head, making the cub rub against her like a kitten. Stop ignoring me, Uzumaki, and fight me, roared Sasuke. Laswara, said Naruto, looking towards the Grimm summon. Oh, this should be fun, declared Laswara, who ran towards Sasuke, who upon seeing the creature running towards him turned around and ran away. Naruto looked from the disappearing forms of Sasuke and Laswara to Kalina, Makari and Razor to see the young cub loving the attention the two girls were giving him, so Naruto just sat back against the tree and resumed eating his lunch. Hashtag later that afternoon hash. The academy day was over and Naruto, as per his sensei's instructions, was making his way to the regular training grounds. He walked onto the grounds to see both of his sensei there. Afternoon Makoto sensei, Yugao sensei, said Naruto smiling. Afternoon Naruto, said Yugao. Good afternoon Naruto, declared Makoto. So what are we starting with? Asked Naruto. Before we start today, you and I are going to the Uzumaki compound, said Makoto. I'm going out on a mission again Naruto. I should be back in a month or so, but until then once again Makoto will be your only sensei, said Yugao, getting a nod from Naruto before both Naruto and Makoto left the training grounds, the young blonde waving to his purple-haired sensei. Naruto and Makoto wandered through the village, Naruto ignoring the glares shot his way by the villagers. Makoto looked back at Naruto every now and again, making sure he was okay to some degree. She could see very clearly that the hatred of the villagers was getting to him, but could think of no way to make him happy. Bar training, so she quickened her pace, and not surprisingly Naruto managed to keep up even as she approached Chunin speed. But by that time they were at the clan district of the village, so she didn't need to worry. Very few clans actually disliked Naruto. The sensei and student duo passed many clan compounds. First was the Inuzuka, next was the Nara, the Yamanaka, the Aburame, the Jigoku, Karaikage, Hano, and finally the Uchiha compound. After another few minutes of walking, the two came up to a small by comparison compound, but it was still rather large, housing about 20 buildings from what Naruto could see. Alright Naruto, you're going to need some blood for this, said Makoto. What do you mean sensei? Asked Naruto, looking innocently at his sensei. Makoto smiled and shook her head. The compound is locked with what's called a blood seal. The only way to unlock it is with blood. Now your blood hasn't been entered into the key, but your mother's has, so you should theoretically be able to get in. You just need to swipe some blood on the gate and push a little chakra into it, said Makoto. Naruto nodded to his sensei and bit his thumb and then smeared the blood on the gate, pushing chakra into the metal. To his surprise, the gate glowed white for a moment before clicking, and with a screech slowly swung open and the two walked into the compound. Naruto was shocked at the sight of the compound as he looked around. All of the walls were covered by the spiral symbol he wore on his shirts. The grounds were covered by lush green grass only an inch or so tall. There were about 25 to 30 buildings in the compound. Before we get much further Naruto, Hokage-sama told me earlier today, as of today this compound and everything within is yours. He told me that he wanted to let you live here once we started training you, but there was a lot of hurdles to cross to allow it, said Makoto. Naruto turned to his sensei with a shocked look on his face. This place is mine, questioned Naruto, gesturing to the compound, getting a nod from Makoto, who wore a smile. Yes Naruto, it is. I'll help you move your stuff from your apartment after a quick tour, said Makoto. How come you can't open the gate but you can give me a tour of this place? Asked Naruto, looking skeptically at his sensei. Well, truth be told, I lied about not being able to unlock the gate. Kushina keyed my blood into the gate when we were in the academy. I was just checking if you could unlock the gate, so I was sure if I needed to key your blood into the key because I know how to, but I have forgotten the finer points of the procedure, declared Makoto, rubbing the back of her neck enviously. Naruto nodded before following his sensei. Most of the buildings here are homes, only about 4 or 5 are different, said Makoto, walking down the main street of the compound. That there is the clan head's home, that's where your mother lived when she was young, said Makoto, pointing to the house at the end of the road. Before turning down a side street, Naruto following diligently behind, the two walked into a building. Once inside, Naruto saw the insides of the building was covered with different plants. This is the greenhouse. The Uzumaki, with their mastery of Fuinjutsu, could grow almost any plant in the habitat it required through the use of seals on the pots, said Makoto, motioning around to all of the plants. All of these plants serve some purpose, though they are all part of either a poison or a medical plant, said Makoto before turning around and walking out of the building. Naruto once more following his sensei, who wandered just a bit further down the street and entered another building. This is the clan library. In here you will find all sorts of things ranging from fictional books to ninjutsu, taijutsu, Kenjutsu and Fuinjutsu scrolls, although I do want you to stay away from the more advanced ninja scrolls for now, okay? Questioned Makoto, looking at Naruto with a critical eye. The young blonde nodded to his sensei, not wanting to disappoint her. After a quick look around, the duo once more moved out of the building and down the street. This time they came to a building that looked out of place. All of the previous buildings were built primarily out of wood, but this one was made of almost entirely stone. Makoto walked straight through the doors of the building. This Naruto is the armory, and here there is a forge and materials to create your own weapons are plenty of pre-made. Naruto. Naruto, called Makoto, stopping her speech when she realized Naruto was no longer beside her. Makoto quickly looked around for the blonde, only to find him standing in front of a glass case, within which was a pair of Tessen battle fans. Naruto? Questioned Makoto, looking at the blonde. Naruto didn't even look up, he looked intently at the fans, thinking. A few weeks had passed since Naruto had been taken to the Uzumaki clan compound. Since then, when not working on his academy studies or training with Makoto or Yugao, he had been in either the library of the compound or the armory, within which he had found many weapons, only two really catching his attention. The Tessen he had found the first time in the armory, and the other, a katana that he had found, was designed to specifically be used with a kenjutsu style known as infinite one-sword style, which he had found scrolls on in the library. Evidently the style was a gender-fluid one that revolved around scattering hundreds of katana around the immediate area and then using speed and deception to rush around and attack with all of the swords at once. The katana Naruto had found had seals, something else Naruto had taken an interest in, etched into the blade. The only one Naruto could understand with his minimal Fuinjutsu knowledge was a storage seal combined with an explosive summoning seal. Basically, the seal was designed to hold all of the user's katana, and when chakra was pushed into the seal, it would release them in an explosion, scattering them all around the immediate area. Unfortunately, the Uzumaki armory was only stocked with about 5 other plain katanas, and Naruto needed more to practice his style. Hence why Naruto was standing at the gates of the Forest of Death, Konoha's most dangerous training grounds. Not that it was to him. No, to the young blonde boy the forest was almost a second or maybe third home, and it's because of all the time he had spent within he was now going into the forest to look for katanas. It may have been rare for people to go into the forest of their own volition. People did still go in. The Chunin exam's second stage was generally held there. Most of the best medical herbs of Konoha were found within, as were some rather exotic meats and the like, so there was no shortage of reasons to go into the forest. Unfortunately, many who went in didn't return, which is why Naruto was there. He knew that if when the bodies of the forest's victims were recovered, any and all tools not securely strapped to their person were left behind, be it the dullest kunai or a family heirloom. Naruto jumped the fence like he had done many times in the past, before he headed for a deeper section of the forest where the more dangerous animals stayed and where more people died, more deaths, more bodies, higher likelihood of weapons and the like. Not even halfway into his journey, Naruto leapt to the left as he sensed a kunai come whizzing at him from behind. He managed to get out of the way just as the kunai would have hit him. Well, Gaki, color me impressed, you move quick, said a voice from behind the blonde. Naruto turned, but was ready to run at a moment's notice. And coming into my little playground all alone, you must have balls of steel, kid, said the voice. As Naruto got a good look at the owner of the voice, she was a woman. She had purple hair tied up into a fanned-out ponytail. She had pupil-less brown eyes. For clothes she wore a beige trench coat, over fishnet armor and an orange skirt. Around her neck was a cord connecting to what looked like a snake fang, and she wore metal shin guards. So what's a cute little Gaki like you doing here in the Forest of Death all by himself? Asked the woman, studying Naruto intently. I came in here looking for katanas to use for my kenjutsu style, said Naruto. What's wrong with the ones in the village? Asked Enko, not sure why a kid would venture into the Forest of Death. I can't afford one, said Naruto sadly. Ask your mommy or daddy to get you one, said Enko. However, she immediately regretted saying that as Naruto looked down with a sad look in his eyes. Oh, orphan? Asked Enko. Naruto nodded, a single tear slipping from his eye. Sai look sorry Gaki. Why don't you come with me and let's see if we can find you a katana, said Anko. Naruto looked up. Thanks Miss Pretty Lady, said Naruto. Hashtag the next day hash. Naruto was sitting outside with his two friends under their usual tree, the spot they claimed on the first day at the academy. Kalina, Makari and Naruto sat quietly eating their respective lunches when a girl approached them. She wasn't from their class and she wore a pink oriental shirt and bluish-green pants. Her dark brown hair was done up into two buns, one on either side of her head, and her brown eyes were focused on the blonde of the group. Naruto? Questioned the girl, looking at the blonde, looking like she was about to burst into tears. Why yes, said Naruto, confused. He recognized the girl but he couldn't recall why or where from. It's really you, I finally found you, said the girl as she lunged forwards and hugged Naruto tightly as tears fell from her eyes. I missed you, Ototo, whispered the girl as she cried. As she said that, memories flooded his mind from a time he so desperately tried to forget. Tenten Nichan, said Naruto, tears forming in his own eyes as he hugged his elder sister. Meanwhile, the two other girls watched the scene with smiles on their faces. Sniff, all right, that's enough of that. You have to introduce me to your friends here, Ototo, declared Tenten as she let go of Naruto, who nodded to her. Tenten, nay, this is Makari Karakage and Kalina Jigoku. Kalina, Makari, this is my Nichan Tenten, said Naruto, introducing the three. Nice to meet ya, said Tenten with a smile, looking at Naruto's two friends. Nice to meet you too, Tenten-san, said Makari. So Naruto, why didn't you tell us you had a sister, asked Kalina. Well, to be completely honest, I forgot I did. We know each other from the orphanage, which when I was thrown out I kinda just tried to block everything out, said Naruto, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, looking to his dark blue-haired friend. By the way, Nei-chan, have you, said Naruto, trailing off, not really wanting to ask in case she hadn't been adopted, questioned Tenten, getting a nod from Naruto. Yep, you're looking at Tenten Higurashi, daughter of Juden and Miliana Higurashi, owner of Higurashi Weapons, best weapon store in Konoha, said Tenten with a grin. Good for you, Tenten, nay, said Naruto with a soft smile. What about you? Asked Tenten, getting a sad shake of the head from Naruto. No, but I found out who my mother is, said Naruto with a grin. Is? Questioned Tenten. Her name is Kushina Uzumaki, she's in a coma, said Naruto. No way, exclaimed Tenten, looking shocked. What? Asked Naruto. Your mother was my father's teammate, declared Tenten. Hashtag later that afternoon hash. Naruto walked up to the regular training ground to see Yugao standing there. Afternoon, Yugao sensei, said Naruto, walking up to his purple-haired teacher. Afternoon, Naruto, spoke Yugao. So what's the plan? Asked Naruto. Well, today you're going to be working on your chakra control some more, said Yugao, making Naruto sigh. Not more leaf-sticking exercise, said Naruto, looking at his sensei with a pleading look. No, not more leaf-sticking exercise, giggled Yugao, watching Naruto's reaction. No, this is a new exercise, tree climbing, said Yugao, walking over to a nearby tree and simply walked straight up it. You need to push chakra to the soles of your feet and walk up the tree too much and you'll blast of the trunk too little and you won't stick, declared Yugao, who was now hanging upside down from a low-hanging branch. She then threw a kunai at the blonde's feet. Use that to mark your progress, said Yugao as she sat down on the branch of the tree and watched as Naruto took the kunai and walked up to the tree. Before putting one foot on the tree, then his other foot, Naruto managed to get about 2 steps up the tree before he was blasted off. Keep going, Naruto, you'll get it, declared Yugao with a reassuring smile. Hashtag several days later hash. Naruto sat with his two friends under their usual tree eating their respective lunches. After the day Tenten introduced herself, she had slotted nicely into their little social group, which makes in no surprise she came running up to them with a grin plastered on her face. Guys, I finally got it, declared Tenten excitedly as she ran up to the three of them. Got what, Nei-chan? Asked Naruto. The jutsu I got, the Henge no Jutsu, transformation jutsu, down, declared Tenten, smiling. Awesome, show us Ten-chan, said Kalina looking at her excited friend. Henge number jutsu, called Tenten after finishing her chain of hand signs, and in a poof of smoke Tenten was no more and instead there stood a second Naruto. Cool, right? Asked the second Naruto with a grin. Yeah, it's cool, said Makari with a grin. Can you teach us? Asked Kalina. A poof of smoke once more engulfed the second Naruto and Tenten was once more there. Sure, the hand signs are dog then boar, and finally Ram and Sensei said to put about an 8 of your chakra into it while thinking about what you want to change into, said Tenten. The three friends nodded and did as Tenten instructed, and all three were engulfed in smoke. When the smoke cleared, none of them looked normal in any sense of the word. Kalina had transformed into a brown-haired woman who looked almost like a human boulder. She was rather fat and her eyes had green sclera, black irises and white pupils. Makari on the other hand transformed into a woman who looked just short of a twig. There was literally no meat on her bones. She had a few bones sticking out of her skin. Her hair was almost non-existent. She had purple sclera, white irises and green pupils. Naruto looked the most normal of the three, and that was saying something. He stood 8 feet tall, lanky, 4-foot-long arms. But aside from unusual proportions, Naruto looked like a regular person with normal bone structure and such. His eyes, white sclera, blue irises, and black pupils. The only out of the ordinary thing was his size. In the blink of an eye all three turned back. That was good for a first try, said Tenten. Henge number jutsu, called Naruto. A few weeks later. Naruto stood in his clan compound. He was working on his Henge no jutsu. He had got to the stage where his transformation was perfect, but he could tell from using it the jutsu essentially coated him in a shell of his chakra in the form he desired to take, hence the one hit to dispel the hit shattered the chakra shell in the jutsu. Naruto was working on trying to make the jutsu a true transformation, one that couldn't be dispelled with a simple punch. So Naruto, you never told us why you want to make a full transformation, said Kalina. Naruto had invited Kalina and Makari over to help him by trying to dispel his transformation. Well, I have told you both I'm from two clans, right? Questioned Naruto, already knowing the answer but just wanting to make sure his reasoning was clear to the two of them. He got a simple nod from his two friends. And you know about the kunoichi and shinobi style separations, right? Questioned the blonde once more, getting a nod from his two friends. Well, I want to be able to learn both the kunoichi and shinobi arts from both of my clans. I just feel like I need to at least learn both branches of the Uzumaki clan styles so I can do my clan proud, said Naruto. Both girls nodded in understanding. Alright, let's try this, muttered Naruto, deciding on his next course of action, overloading the technique with chakra. Henge number jutsu, called Naruto, and he was engulfed in a plume of smoke. Once it cleared, there stood someone different. She stood about the same height as Naruto and shared the same black eyes, however her hair was reddened. Naruto, said Kalina, pointing at Naruto's chest body. The red-haired girl looked down. Kyaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaaa Naruto stood outside Higurashi Weapons, the store where Tenten worked. He had a small blush on his cheeks for what he was about to do. Naruto opened the door to the store and walked inside. Hello and welcome to Higurashi Weapons. How can Naruto? Questioned Tenten, looking at the boy, who nodded to his elder sister figure. What's up, Odoto? Asked Tenten, looking at the nervous Naruto. Une-chan, I need your help with something, said Naruto, shifting from one foot to the other. Obviously, said Tenten with a kind smile. I need a set of clothes, said Naruto. A set of clothes? Surely you can do that yourself, Odoto, or do you want Une-chan's opinion? Asked Tenten teasingly. Kunoichi clothes, muttered Naruto, getting a weird look from Tenten. Is there somewhere more private I can show you? Why, preferably with no windows facing the street? Asked Naruto. Tenten quirked an eyebrow but nodded and waved Naruto to follow her. Tou-san, I'm taking a break, called Tenten. Sure thing, Ten-chan, said a burly-looking man stepping out of the back room. Oh, and who's this? Asked the man, spying Naruto. Tou-san, this is Naruto, my Odoto. You remember the one I was telling you about? Asked Tenten. Akashina's boy, spoke the man, getting a tentative nod from the blonde. It's okay, kid, I won't treat you like those villagers, and if you ever need a place to lay low, my door is always open to you, said the man with a kind smile. Naruto nodded before both he and Tenten walked upstairs to Tenten's room. Once inside, Naruto closed the door behind him. So what's this all about, Naruto? Questioned Tenten. Naruto unzipped and took off his jacket before he began flipping through hand signs. Henge number jutsu, called Naruto, overloading the jutsu with chakra, and when he smoke cleared once again stood a red-haired girl with her red hair cascading down her shoulder and a pair of black eyes, and once more she was. It's a henge, Naruto, why do you need kunoichi clothes for this? Asked Tenten, not understanding. Dispel the henge, declared Naruto, after quickly covering his lower regions with his jacket. His voice sounded different, but Tenten paid it no mind. Naruto, started Tenten. Just do it, declared Naruto, a blush adorning his face. Tenten rolled her eyes and lightly punched Naruto in the gut, knocking him back where he fell onto her bed, but to her surprise, Naruto retained his form. Tenten looked at Naruto confused. It's a real transformation, Tenten. I am actually a girl, said Naruto, with a huge blush on his face, covering his upper chest with his arms. What? Screamed Tenten. Both girls then heard loud bangs, and the door to Tenten's room was just short of ripped off its hinges. What's going on? I heard a scream, questioned Juden. Naruto was covering herself and standing behind Tenten. To-san, Naruto made a proper transformation technique, said Tenten, excited. So why is he half? Asked Juden. Whenever I try this transformation, whatever clothes I'm wearing just disappear. I took my jacket off before I transformed for that reason, said Naruto, from behind Tenten. And you have transformed to look like that, why? Asked Juden, raising an eyebrow. I wanted to learn both the kunoichi and shinobi techniques of my clans to make my ancestors proud, declared Naruto. So you transformed into a girl, and with this transformation you are actually a girl? Questioned Juden, getting a shaky nod from Naruto. Well, my boy, wait, girl, you're gonna need an outfit for that, and I think I have an idea for the disappearing clothes problem, said Juden. Why, yeah, I came here to ask for Tenten's help with the outfit, muttered Naruto, looking down. Well, Tenten, let's go see if we can find an outfit for your Imoto, said Juden, getting a nod from his daughter. Unfortunately, we don't sell underwear here, so you'll have to shop elsewhere for that, said Juden, making Naruto's face go so red a tomato would be jealous. Just wait here, Naruto, we'll be back in a moment, said Tenten. Narumi, declared Naruto. What? Asked Tenten. It's what I have decided, my name is when I'm like this, said Narumi. Right, well, Imoto, just stay here for a moment and we'll be back, said Tenten. Narumi nodded, and both Juden and Tenten walked downstairs to the store. Narumi sat there with her jacket tied around her waist and her arms wrapped around her upper body. She looked around Tenten's room, just calmly waiting for the father and daughter duo to return. It only took a few moments of waiting before the duo returned. Here, said Tenten, handing Narumi a pile of clothes while Juden shut the door. Narumi placed the clothes on the bed, taking the first thing from the pile. It turned out to be a light gray tank top. Narumi quickly put the top on, finding it slightly heavier than she expected. She was about to speak when Tenten beat her to it. All of this stuff is made from a macro weave of ninja wire and cotton, so it might feel heavy, but it would stop a kunai coming at you, and all of it has growth seals so they will grow with you, said Tenten, who had her back turned to Narumi, who nodded to the explanation before moving on to the next clothing item, a pair of blue pants. Narumi quickly pulled on the pants before poking Tenten's shoulder, making the girl nod, indicating she was listening. I'm decent enough for you to turn around, Nei-chan, said Narumi. Tenten turned around to face Narumi. Looks good so far, Imoto, said Tenten before taking a step over to the bed and picked up a black open shirt. She then threw the garment over Narumi's shoulders. The red-haired girl quickly pulled her arms through the sleeves before Tenten threw a pair of elbow-length red and black striped gloves at the girl, who quickly put them on. Well, how do I look? Asked Narumi. Tenten stepped forwards and stepped around the girl, hemming as she went. You look good, Narumi-chan, spoke Tenten after a few moments of inspection, before then pulling the girl to the door and opening it. What do you think, Tu-san? Questioned Tenten, pushing Narumi out of the room into her father's sight. Looking good, Narumi-chan, said Juden with a thumbs up. But, said the man. But, questioned Narumi. The hair, it's beautiful, but the loose hair just doesn't suit the clothes nor you, Narumi, muttered Juden, looking the girl up and down. Here, try a ponytail, said Tenten, handing Narumi a hair tie. Narumi nodded and tied her hair back into a ponytail. Better? Questioned Narumi, getting a nod from both Juden and Tenten. So how much do I owe you? Asked Narumi. Consider them a gift from an uncle and your sister, said Juden with a smile. I couldn't, said Narumi, shaking her head. Yes you can and you will, declared Juden, sending a friendly glare at the girl. Narumi just sighed and nodded. Good girl, said Juden. So what was your plan regarding the clothes? Questioned Narumi. Juden clicked his fingers. That's right. Now my plan is a storage seal that swaps clothes when chakra is used in a certain way, like what the Anbu used. This way you wouldn't have to carry around both sets of clothes physically and waste time changing, said Juden. Narumi nodded. Alright, this will take a little bit of time, so go take off that stuff and change back to Naruto, said Juden. Narumi nodded and walked into Tenten's room and stripped before releasing her jutsu, returning to Naruto before walking out of the room. Okay, now Naruto, you're going to need to lose the shirt because this seal goes on the shoulder, said Juden. Naruto nodded and took off his shirt. Juden disappeared downstairs, before returning a moment later with a pot of ink and a small brush. Okay, now Naruto, you're going to have to stay as still as possible so this doesn't screw up, okay? Questioned Juden. Naruto nodded before adjusting himself into a meditative pose. Juden then got to work on the admittedly simple seal and was done with the basic design in a few moments. Alright Naruto, now I need you to use your technique now, out here, because if you move into the other room the seal might take that movement as the trigger, said Juden. Naruto nodded and Juden and Tenten both turned away from the blonde, who quickly flipped through hand signs. Warok no Jutsu, sexy jutsu, called Naruto, deciding on the spot to change the name. He was engulfed in smoke and once it cleared Narumi was in Naruto's place. Now Narumi, go and put your clothes on except the overshirt, okay? Declared Juden. Narumi did as instructed and returned a moment later wearing her new gear. Okay, now I need to do the seal again, linking this one to the first one, okay? Questioned Juden. Narumi nodded and resumed her position on the floor in a meditative position, and Juden quickly drew the seal on Narumi's shoulder. Within a few moments Juden was done. He stood up and looked the seal over to make sure it worked. Okay Narumi, release your technique, said Juden. Narumi nodded and released her technique and Naruto was back. Okay now Naruto, now use your technique again to make sure the seal works, said Juden. Naruto nodded. Warok no Jutsu, called Naruto, and once more he was covered by smoke which when dissipated revealed Narumi, however this time with the addition of clothes. Okay, from now on whatever you put on in either form should stay with that form, said Juden. Narumi nodded and put on her jacket before releasing the technique. Thanks a lot Tenten ne, Juden Oji-san, said Naruto. Ne-chan, I need your help with something else, said Naruto. Yeah Ototo, said Tenten. Like Juden Oji-san pointed out, I don't have underwear as Narumi, said Naruto, a blush spreading over his face. Come on, let's go, muttered Tenten with a blush on her face, grabbing his wrist and walking down the stairs. Next day afternoon, training grounds. Naruto walked up to the training grounds he trained with his two sensei, and saw Makoto standing there with a smile on her face. Naruto let a grin spread across his face as he walked up to her. What's got you so happy, Naruto-kun? Asked Makoto, spying the huge grin on the boy's face. I finally did something to make one of my wishes come true, said Naruto, his grin growing wider. Oh? Questioned Makoto. I managed to find a way to become a girl so I can learn kunoichi styles from you, Makoto-sensei, said Naruto before flipping through his jutsu's hand signs. Waroke no jutsu, called Naruto being engulfed in smoke, which once cleared revealed Narumi. I made sure everything is right. I am as much a woman as you are now, Makoto-sensei, said Narumi with a grin. Makoto sighed. She should have guessed. Uzumaki were stubborn people, just like Kushina. Once she got an idea in her head, she wouldn't rest until she had completed it. I studied all of the biology texts in the Uzumaki compound to make sure this form is perfect, said Narumi proudly. I am going to test you myself just to make sure you're right, Naruto, said Makoto. Narumi, not Naruto. When I'm like this, I'm Narumi, said Narumi with a smile. Makoto nodded. An hour later, Hokuge's office. On Naruto, I was wondering when I'd see you again, declared Hiruzen as Naruto and Makoto walked into the Hokuge's office. Hey Ajiji, said Naruto with a grin. So what can I do for you two today? Asked Hiruzen. Naruto now needs to be signed up for the kunoichi exclusive classes at the academy, said Makoto. Oh, and why's that? Asked Hiruzen. Don't play dumb, Gigi, we all know the reason. Don't pretend you don't. I'm a censor, remember, so I sensed you looking at the demonstration to Makoto-sensei with your ball, said Naruto. While that is true, I would like to see with my own eyes and not through the crystal ball if you don't mind, said Hiruzen. Fine, declared Naruto, closing the door behind him before flipping through hand signs. Naruto sat in his regular seat at the back of the class next to the window with Makari and Kalina sitting next to him. It had been several months since he created the Waroke no Jutsu, sexy jutsu, which he had mastered to the point he only needed single-handed hand signs to perform. Since then he'd begun learning kunoichi Uchiha taijutsu styles from Makoto along with learning the Uzumaki kunoichi styles from scrolls in his compound. About a month after Naruto created his jutsu, he asked Yugao if she could teach him kenjutsu. Much to her delight, she had almost instantly agreed to help him with kenjutsu. Speaking of his purple-haired sensei, the woman had been surprisingly calm seeing Naruto's jutsu. He suspected either the Hokage or Makoto or maybe even both had told her about it, but that was neither here nor there. Alright class, today we will be starting you off on the first jutsu. You're going to be taught the Henge no Jutsu, transformation jutsu, declared Iruka with a large smile. The academy class hadn't been scheduled to start work on the jutsu for at least a month, but the class had picked up most things quickly, so he had decided to start work on the jutsu earlier. Iruka was drawn out of his musing by a raised hand at the back of the room. Yes, Kalina? Questioned the teacher. What if we can already do the Henge no Jutsu? Asked the girl, getting a nod from both Makari and Naruto. Now that surprised Iruka. He knew of Naruto's skill with the jutsu, but Kalina and Makari, that was new. Well, if you are proficient enough with the jutsu, the time is yours to do what you want, said Iruka, getting a nod from Kalina. And the only person I know will be having free time is Naruto, said Iruka, getting a nod from the boy. So everyone outside, said Iruka, standing up and walking outside. Normally they would practice inside, but given how nice the day was, Iruka decided to take it outside. Alright, is there anyone who already knows the Henge no Jutsu? Questioned Iruka, getting raised hands from Naruto, Makari and Kalina. Alright Naruto, you just go do what you want to for now, said Iruka. Naruto nodded and walked over to his little social group's tree where he sat and waited. Alright, you two show me your Henge and I'll decide if you can go, said Iruka. Both girls nodded before flipping through the hand signs faster than the genin could track. Henge number jutsu, both girls called out at the same time, causing smoke to erupt around them. Once the smoke cleared, they both looked like older versions of themselves, with minimal differences. Kalina for one didn't have her glasses or the scars over her eye. Some may have just thought they were transformed into what they hoped to be when they grow up, but Iruka knew the two women in front of him. How could he not? One was his Jonin sensei and the other was eventually a second Jonin sensei. The amount of time she helped his team, the two women were Makari and Kalina's mothers. Okay girls, that's good enough, you can go, said Iruka nodding to the two, who dispelled their transformations and then quickly walked over to Naruto. So what do you two want to do? Asked Naruto seeing his two friends approach him. Spar, suggested Kalina. Makari shrugged at the idea. Sure, why not? Said Naruto standing up. The three young nin in training quickly walked over to the sparring circles. Finding none occupied, they decided to use one themselves. So who's sparring who? Asked Naruto. If you don't mind, I'd like to spar with you, Naruto. Ka-san says I need to build up better synergy with my demon, said Kalina. I don't mind. Makari, you happy to referee? Questioned the blonde, getting a nod from the ice blue-haired girl. Oni Sagan. Kuchio's demon restriction. Summon, called Kalina, quickly flipped through hand signs before slamming her hand on the ground where a pentagram formed in what looked to be blood, before the ground disappeared and flames poured out, before a clawed hand burst from the ground, then another before a rather humanoid-looking demon, despite the clawed hands and feet and the horns on his head, pulled itself out of the hole before looking around. Why have you summoned me, mistress? I see no fight, said the demon, turning and kneeling to Kalina. Rise, Zuexin, I have summoned you as per my Ka-san's instructions to increase our level of synergy with a friendly spar with Naruto, said Kalina, pointing to Naruto. So no maiming? Questioned the demon, getting a shake of the head from her master. Yes, no maiming please, I'm rather attached to my limbs, said Naruto, making both girls and even the demon snicker. While they were snickering, Naruto bent down with a scroll and unfurled it, revealing a sealing matrix which Naruto channeled chakra into, making his katana appear in his hand. Alright, are we all ready? Asked Makari, getting a nod from Naruto as he rolled up his scroll and another nod from Kalina. Then begin, said Makari, rising her hand in an arc. Zuexin jumped forwards at Naruto. The young blonde smiled before flicking his katana up, letting it go, allowing the blade to flip once at the apex of the flight. The blade sent out an explosion, summoning up about 50 other katana that were shot out from the explosion, sending the blades rocketing into the ground. Zuexin barely managed to avoid all of the blades. Kalina came out with only a single slice going down the side of her arm, and Makari was outside the blade rain. Naruto caught the original katana just in time to block a downwards claw strike from the summoned demon. Naruto smirked and let his footing slip. The demon ignored the boy's smirk and pushed harder, making Naruto drop to the ground. However, this was his plan. Using the momentum of the attack, Naruto slipped through the demon's legs while flashing through one-handed hand signs. Warok no Jutsu, called Naruto as he slid underneath the demon, transforming into Narumi as he went. The now girl, dressed in her kunoichi attire, then made a break for the Jigoku heiress while the Bluenet's demon tried to find Narumi. Kalina's eyes widened when she saw Narumi coming at her with a blade in her hands. Kalina on instinct pulled a blade out of the ground from beside her to block Narumi as she jumped into a downward swing with enough force to knock Kalina to the ground. However, before she could end the spar, her senses told her to move, so Narumi forced chakra to her feet and pushed off the ground, flipping back over the demon summon of Kalina, who tried to swipe at her. I should really train with my Sharingan, muttered Narumi, forcing chakra to her eyes, making them go from charcoal black to blood red with a pair of tomo in each eye, and the world seemed to slow down around her. Narumi then bolted forwards, hitting the katanas buried in the ground forwards at Zuexin, who smacked the blades that came flying at him away. As the redhead drew close, she threw her blade at the ground just in front of the demon and next to another blade before then undoing her transformation, turning back into Naruto, who ran forwards and used both katanas as handholds as he dived forwards legs first at the demon, kicking him back and into Kalina, knocking both of them out of the ring. Winner by ring out, Naruto, declared Makari. Good work, you two, said Naruto, walking over to his friend and her summon. Thank you, Zuexin, you are dismissed, said Kalina. Until next time, mistress, said the demon before once more a fiery pentagram opened for the demon to jump into. Thanks, Naruto, said Kalina with a smile to her friend. Later that afternoon. Naruto walked up to the training ground. He trained with Makoto and Yugao. He walked up to the training grounds. He saw Makoto standing there waiting for him. Afternoon, sensei, said Naruto, walking up to Makoto. Good day, Naruto, said Makoto with a smile at the blonde. So what's on the agenda for today, sensei? Asked Naruto. A new chakra control technique, said Makoto with a smile. Alright, let's get to it, declared Naruto with a large amount of enthusiasm. Alright, follow me, Naruto, said Makoto, walking further into the training grounds. Naruto followed without question, and after a few minutes of walking they came to a river. I would suggest you strip down to your boxers so you don't get all of your clothes wet, said Makoto. Naruto nodded and removed all of his clothes but his boxers, only to have to look for Makoto, who had disappeared while he removed his clothes. Here, Naruto, said Makoto from atop the river, standing perfectly on the water. Wow, sensei, how are you doing that? Asked Naruto, looking shocked at his sensei. This is the chakra control exercise, Naruto. It's similar to tree climbing, but the water is constantly moving, so you have to constantly fluctuate how much chakra you channel to the soles of your feet, said Makoto with a smile. Naruto nodded and walked over to the river's edge before calmly stepping out onto the water. With his first step feeling stable, Naruto decided to take the second step and then another and another. Hey sensei, I'm doing it, said Naruto, interrupted when his chakra failed and he fell into the water that was just deep enough to go over his head. Makoto stood there giggling at Naruto, who surfaced and saw his sensei giggling at him. It brought a smile to his face, as the last few training sessions with Makoto she hadn't been smiling at all, but then he remembered the task at hand and got back to practicing. A week later. Naruto awoke in his bed with a grin on his face. Today was the day he was going to show Makoto he'd mastered the water walking exercise, so getting out of bed, Naruto quickly went through his morning rituals, taking a shower, getting dressed, eating a light breakfast before in a flash he was out the door. Jumping up into the trees, Naruto jumped towards his regular training ground. However, once he reached the market district of Konoha, he could sense the general sadness in the air and slowed down to try and find out why everyone was sad. Did you hear? Questioned one villager to another, unaware their conversation was being listened to by Naruto. About the Uchiha? Questioned the second villager. Something's happened to the Uchiha, thought Naruto. Yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? Muttered the first villager. One night, I still can't believe it, muttered the second one. Who's going to run the police now they're all dead? Questioned the first. No, they can't be, thought Naruto, who in a flash was running off to the training ground where he was supposed to meet Makoto. Sensei can't be dead, she's too strong, thought Naruto, tears forming in his eyes as he ran. The blonde boy ran up to the training ground. Sensei, sensei, called the blonde, looking around for Makoto. Naruto, called a voice from behind him. The blonde turned around to see Yugao there with a sad look on her face. Yugao sensei, where's Makoto sensei? I was supposed to meet her here, said Naruto, facing Yugao, who could now see the tears in his eyes, making her realize Naruto had already heard and was denying it. Naruto, Makoto, she's dead, said Yugao. No, you're lying, she can't be dead, declared Naruto. Yugao then stepped closer and wrapped her arms around the boy. I'm so sorry, Naruto, I'm so sorry, whispered Yugao. Makoto sensei, wailed Naruto, tears falling freely from his eyes as he clung to his purple-haired sensei. Naruto had finished his planning and hiding places and was on his way towards Ichiraku's to hopefully get something to eat before the festival started, and he had to essentially cower in his compound. However, as Naruto approached the stand, he stopped in the middle of the street, as he saw that Ichiraku Ramen was closed. Well, so much for that plan, muttered Naruto, turning around. The blonde sighed before deciding he wanted to watch the sunset, and the only place he would do that was from atop the Hokage's monument. Naruto ran through the village, avoiding all of the people out and about, successfully staying out of trouble. He made it to the bottom of the mountain within 5 minutes and made it to the top within 2. Once at the top, Naruto walked forwards and hopped the railing so he could sit on the Yondaime Hokage's head before looking out over the village that scorned him, hated him, and denied his very existence. The same village he wanted to protect, to serve as a ninja. Naruto sat there on the carved rock and watched as the sun slipped below the horizon. As the sky was painted with a variety of colors, Naruto felt relaxed as he watched. However, that relaxed feeling went away when he spotted lights turning on in the streets below him. Once the lights began to turn on, Naruto jumped to his feet and made his way down the side of the mountain before taking off towards his home using the backstreets rather than risk an early start to a beating. Once Naruto entered the clan district, he bit his thumb and ran it along his summoning tattoo. Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning jutsu, called Naruto, slamming his hand on the ground where a plume of smoke erupted from. Once it cleared, there sat Razor and Laswara. Naruto ni, called the razorback cub, excitedly rubbing himself on Naruto's leg. Naruto bent down and patted the cub's head. What do you need, Naruto-sama? Asked the older of the creatures. Okay, first of all, Laswara, how many times do I have to tell you just Naruto is fine, said Naruto angrily. My apologies, Naruto, said the razorback. And secondly, tonight is a rather rough night for me usually, so I'd like to have you two around just so I feel safer. I mean, if that's alright with you, muttered the blonde, looking down. Sure, Naruto, that's fine, said Laswara before the three of them walked towards Naruto's compound. After slipping through the gates, Naruto made sure they were firmly shut so no drunken civilians could get it before then walking up to his house. Once through his doors, Naruto let out a sigh before walking into his lounge room. Surprise! Came the voices of Naruto's friends and surrogate family as he flipped on the light switch. In the room, Naruto saw Hiruzen, Ayame, Tsuki, Tenten, Kalina, Makari, Yugao, Hana, Anko and Kurenai. Wah? Questioned Naruto, looking at all of the people. Happy birthday, Naruto-kun, said Ayame, stepping forwards and pulling the surprised boy into a hug. What are you all doing here? I thought you would all be at the festival, said Naruto, shocked. You're more important than any festival, Ototo, declared Tenten, hugging the boy with a smile. Naruto stood there stiffly as his friends all had smiles on their faces. The blonde's face then split into a smile. Thanks everyone, said Naruto with a smile. Unfortunately, I cannot stay long, so I'll just give you this, said Hiruzen, pulling a scroll out of his sleeve before passing it to the blonde, who took the scroll before quickly opening it to see a sealing matrix. Kirio's Naruto channeled chakra through the ink, and to his surprise 4 books popped out of the seal. They are your mother's books on Fuinjutsu beginner to adept, stated Hiruzen. Naruto held the books closely and looked at them as if breathing on them would cause them to burst into flames. Naruto then sealed the books back in the scroll before tackling his surrogate grandfather. Thank you, declared Naruto as he hugged the man. The aged Kage just smiled and patted the boy's head. Once Naruto let go of his grandfather, the man's smile faded a bit. Unfortunately, Naruto, I must take my leave now, but I'll try and come by and see you tomorrow, said Hiruzen, striding over to the door before slipping through it. Well, given Hokage-sama got us started, here Naruto-kun, this is from me, said Yugao, also handing Naruto a scroll, which he opened to see once more a seal. You might want to unseal this one on the ground, suggested Yugao. Naruto nodded and put the scroll flat on the floor before channeling chakra into the sealing matrix. Then, to his surprise and immense happiness, a guitar appeared. You always said you wanted to learn how to play an instrument, so, said Yugao, gesturing to the guitar. Naruto lifted up the instrument, getting a feel for the weight. It was surprisingly light, and when he lifted up the guitar, he saw a beginner's book for learning how to play the instrument. Naruto turned to Yugao. This is amazing, Yugao-chan, thank you, said Naruto with a smile before hugging the woman who smiled at him. Once they broke the hug, Naruto sealed both items back in the scroll before putting the scroll with the one from Hiruzen. Here, Naruto, happy birthday, this is from me and Ayame, said Tsuki, handing Naruto a little booklet. Naruto flipped through it and saw it was a bunch of vouchers for Ichirakus. Naruto just smiled and hugged the father-daughter duo.